Maurice Caldwell was convicted of a murder that happened in the Alamany projects in 1990. He lived in those projects. When the murder happened, he was upstairs in one of the apartments with a female, and there were a bunch of guys out on the street selling drugs. It was about 2:40 in the morning. 4 guys drove into the projects to buy crack cocaine. They got in a fight with the dealers over the amount of money for the amount of drugs. And one of the dealers pulled out a handgun and shot one of them in the chest from like a couple feet away, and that guy died. 2 of them ran off on foot. The last guy pulled his friend back into the car, and somebody started shooting at them with a shotgun as they're driving away.
It was a drug-related murder that took place in the Alamany Housing Project, and I became a suspect through an officer. That's what made me put me involved in this crime, and from then on, everything just started going downhill. Towards, everything pointing to me being guilty. Nothing of my innocence, nothing of me being innocent. It was just all about guilt, and that's what they ran with. I was in the house with a female at the time, having sexual relations. While up in there, we heard gunshots, and at the time, when you heard the gunshots, people go outside to see what happened, and I was one of the persons that went outside after the gunshots happened.
2 weeks later, they decide to canvass. They're going to canvass the projects, go knock door to door and see if anyone knows anything. The homicide inspector actually brings out a narcotics investigator named Kit Crenshaw with him. And Crenshaw had a past with Maurice. He'd assaulted Maurice, he'd threatened to kill him, and Maurice had filed a civilian complaint against Crenshaw a couple months before this happens. And we actually know from documents in the police file that it was police's idea to look into Maurice Caldwell. They had no evidence against him, but they decided, we think he was involved, and so we're going to focus on him. So the homicide inspector is knocking on doors, and Crenshaw's sort of just hanging out. And the homicide inspector gets one lady, a lady named Mary Cobbs, to let him in and talk to him about what she saw that night, or what she allegedly saw that night. And when he goes inside, Crenshaw grabs Maurice, and he cuffs him. Maurice had just driven in a little bit ago. And he cuffs him, and he brings him up to Mary Cobbs' front door. And they knock on the door. Mary Cobbs answers. He says, I need to talk to the homicide inspector. The homicide inspector has started tape recording their conversation, so all of this is caught on a tape. And the inspector comes to the door, and he says, this is Maurice Caldwell, Twan, the guy I've been telling you about. I need the keys so I can put him in the police car. So the guy gives him the keys, and they go out to the car. And the inspector continues his interview with Mary Cobbs. And he says to Cobbs, that guy is working with me. So now they've essentially told her we're arresting him on this case, right? But she doesn't say, that's the guy who was at the door, that's the guy who did the shooting. She says, I woke up to shots being fired, I looked out my window, I saw 2 guys standing under a light pole with one guy with a handgun, one guy with a shotgun, and I know I would recognize them if I saw them again. They're not from around here, and I don't know their names or nicknames.
Officer Crenshaw asked me what happened, do I know anything about a murder? I'm like, no, I don't know nothing about a murder. Why you keep effing with me, you know what I'm saying? You always messing with me, you know what I'm saying? This is due to me filing a complaint on you, you know what I'm saying? So he's like, yo, you don't know nothing about a murder, huh? I'm like, no. So he let me out the car. He told me to get out the car.
2 weeks later, they come back to Mary Cobbs with a photographic lineup, a 6-pack with 6 photos in it, and Maurice's photo is in it. They know he lives next door to her. They know she's seen him at her front door. And they don't have any other evidence against him, but they're still bringing him up as their suspect, right? So we don't know what they said because they don't turn on the tape until after she makes an identification. But when they turn back on the tape, they say, you identified Maurice Caldwell, the suspect in this case, the man with the shotgun. And if you cooperate, if you continue to cooperate against him, we'll move you out of the projects. And as she testifies at trial, she'd been scared for her life in those projects even before this shooting happened. So this was a big deal to her, getting out of these projects. So
throughout the whole trial, it was witnesses in my favor that got up there and told the exact truth about the crime that happened, and it was witnesses that came from the DA side that told them I had nothing to do with it and all that. But then this one lady, they built this whole case about this one lady and discredit everybody that said it wasn't me that was involved due to the fact they had criminal records. Everybody that said I wasn't involved in a crime had criminal records, had a background. You know what I'm saying? So they looked at that was a motive for them to not believe them, and then they had a motive saying I would do something to them for their testimony. Prison was hard. Prison was stressful. It was difficult. It was unbearable. But it was something that I had to do. You know what I'm saying? For a crime, me going in there for a crime that I didn't commit, I looked at, when they convicted me, I looked at every day I'll be home. Every day the evidence gonna really show. You know what I'm saying? So that's how my days was living. For 20 years, 6 months, and 4 days, every single day was a hope and prayer.
People have done a lot of studies on DNA exonerees, and what we've learned from the almost 300 people now have been exonerated in the U.S. through DNA, and 74% of them had been identified by eyewitnesses. So we now know that eyewitness identification is actually the single largest cause of wrongful convictions. Human memory really isn't perfect. It's not a rewind button, and it's something that changes over time and can be influenced. So partly people just get it wrong sometimes, and also sometimes they're influenced by police or by other people to pick someone out who ends up not being the right person. Up until recently, we really didn't know how often people got it wrong, right? So when the jury sees someone and it's like, let's say a female victim, and I am absolutely sure that's the guy, juries believe them. They're certain, they're not lying, you know, they're just sometimes wrong. And cross-examination really doesn't work because cross-examination was developed to ferret out lies. And if someone isn't lying, then you can't get that out in cross-examination. So police conduct lineups when they have suspects. The really most damaging one is what we call a show-up. So that often happens soon after the crime, and police officers will bring just one person up to the witness and say, is this the guy? And it's really problematic because generally what the police are implying to the witness is that we think this is the guy, right? We're showing you this guy for a reason, and often they're handcuffed, they're escorted by numerous police officers, and so it gives the witness the impression that there is some evidence against this person, and that can affect their memory. And also, they're not picking between, you know, a bunch of people. It's really just one person, and once a witness IDs someone, what you see is their certainty growing over time because that person keeps getting presented to them. So after they pick them out of a show-up, then they'll often show a photographic lineup. And then there's only one person who they've already seen in the lineup, right? So they're going to pick that person, and now they're more confident in their ID because they picked them out twice. And then let's say you get a live lineup and they pick them, and now, you know, it's the same person. And by the time they see them in court, and often they see them first at the preliminary hearing, and they're usually in a jail jumpsuit, like a bright orange jumpsuit. They're often handcuffed, and they're sitting at a defense table. So it's really easy for the witness. Now, you know, the police believe this is the guy, the prosecutor believes this is the guy, I've picked this guy out, and so by now, even if I was only thought it might be him at the beginning, now I'm really sure that it's him. One of the things that police departments in, actually Santa Clara Police Department has been doing for about 10 years, and other police departments are now starting to do, is having what we call a double-blind procedure, where the officer who's administering the lineup doesn't know who the suspect is. So whether it's a live lineup and you have the people coming in, or you have photographs, the officer doesn't know who it is, so they can't unintentionally influence the witness. And then the other thing that the studies have shown are better, which again Santa Clara has adopted, is showing pictures or the people sequentially. So just one at a time instead of all six. So normally the photographic lineups, we call them a six-pack because it's usually 6 photos all on one piece of paper. And what happens is when you're looking at the 6, it's sort of like multiple choice. Which one looks most like the guy? And even if you're told he might not be in there, you're still going to pick the one that mostly people pick out, the one that looks most like. So you're comparing the pictures to each other, as opposed to when you see them, or the people, and when you see them one at a time, you're comparing them to your memory. And so we've seen that when you show them one at a time, witnesses are less likely to pick out someone who is innocent. And they've done it with, like, we call them fillers, they're random other people who aren't the suspect. They're less likely to pick out fillers, but just as likely to pick out the actual person.